Turn the cheek or flip the table. How to stand up for yourself like Jesus would. So if you're watching this, at the time that I'm posting it in North America, it is Easter weekend, and I haven't done a lot of faith content on this channel, so I thought this would be a perfect time to do it. And I want to do a slightly unique take on Jesus because I feel like the version of him that is often taught in organized religion is a very safe, watered down version of what the Bible actually says he was like. So without further ado, let's get into it. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Diana Bandoh. I'm a multi-certified master life coach. I'm a licensed attorney, an entrepreneur. I'm a self-published author. And as a coach, my alias is the Glow Up Guru because I teach a combination of things that help you glow on the outside, as well as things that help deepen your spiritual practice. So that's what the name is all about. And today's message was inspired by a conversation I had in the last 24 hours with someone who has been working with me for almost a year. And there's someone who has a very deep faith, a sincere faith, not a performative, I'm saying I belong to XYZ religion so that I can feel superior, but an actual, genuine, in their heart and soul faith. And the person happens to be a Christian. I know people with sincere faiths of multiple denominations, Muslim and Jewish and all the things, but this particular person happened to be a Christian. And so in her situation, one of the life circumstances that was happening was causing her a lot of frustration, and it involved another person. And the people in her life who were aware of the situation and who she was going to for advice were all of the opinion that she should turn the other cheek. I didn't know this, and while I appreciate where they were coming from, I was like, I actually think that this is one of the times where being like Jesus does not involve turning the other cheek. So I want to read you a little verse. It's from Matthew 21, starting in verse 12. And it says, Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money chargers and chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, "The scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." And what I love about this is if you read the Bible and you read about Jesus, the people who were the most surprised by him were the ones who were like closest to the religious elite and the religious power. So the people who really should have known exactly who he was and what he was about were the ones who had the biggest problem with him. And the ones who he, you would think he would have nothing to do with, refers to him as a friend of sinners. Never calls him a sinner, but he said he was a friend to them. And I think that's really interesting because there's a lot of people now who would call themselves religious and they're not really a friend of anyone. Definitely not sinners, but sometimes even in church, there's a lot of bullying. My backstory with faith is I grew up in church, stopped going to church for about a decade because of things that happened while I was in church. Now there's a term for it. It's called religious trauma. And in the last couple years, I've started going back. But I'm very choosy about the organized religious spaces I'll be involved in. I just happen to have found a really wonderful church home where I feel safe and I'm happy. So with that little background about me and my spiritual journey, let us continue. So a lot of times when people talk about being a person of faith or being Christ-like specifically or being spiritual, whatever, there's this idea that you always have to be passive and that having a deep faith means that nothing bothers you. And that is simply not true. I began my spiritual journey, like my most recent one, about 5 years ago. And in the process of doing that, I had to start doing boundaries work because I had not been taught how to develop mature boundaries on my own. In fact, I was taught just the opposite. I was taught to just kind of roll over and play dead and, whoever was in power, let them get away with whatever. And so if it meant, staying in a job where I was underpaid, sexually harassed, disrespected. That is what I did. I just took it because of the way that I was groomed growing up to just, accept whatever I was told. I'm first generation American, and my parents are from two different countries, but the countries where they're from are not ones where women are, encouraged to be particularly vocal about their rights. So it's the fact that I'm even able to get on YouTube and record a message like this today is the result of years of unlearning and therapy and healing and journaling and crying and evolving and realizing that I get to, I have a right to feel safe in any space that I'm in. Nobody has a right to make me feel disrespected. Nobody has a right to make me feel like I can't physically, do the things that make my body feel safe. And that's something I didn't realize until I was in my late 30s. So when should you, because Jesus is also known for saying, turn the other cheek, and, a lot of times when people are taught about faith and spirituality, there's this idea that you should only turn the other cheek, and there's not like another side to the coin. There's a really good book about boundaries by Doctors Cloud and Townsend. And one of the things that they do really well in that book is they talk about the myths that people have about boundaries. And one of them is that you can only enforce a boundary when you're angry, which could not be any further from the truth. And in the book, they talk about how some of the most calm people are people with mature boundaries. And I would add, the reason that they're so calm is because they know what they will do to you if you try and cross their boundaries. And in the case of Jesus, it was he'll walk into a place of worship and literally flip tables. And, I don't know if you're into Real Housewives. It is one of my guilty pleasures. I'm pretty sure Jersey is the only franchise where flipping tables on cameras has happened. But that's why I have my kind of joking hypothesis that if Jesus was a Real Housewife, he'd be one of the ones from Jersey. But if you are the type of person who knows that when your buttons are pushed, you will flip a table, you never need to get mad. You don't, because you know, oh my gosh, try it with me, it's gonna be so bad for you. Ooh, I pity the fool. You can stay really calm. So I want to talk about a couple ways to know whether or not you should turn the other cheek or flip the table. And then I want to tell you about something I've got, coming up. So the big high level thing about the distinction between is this a turn the cheek situation or is this a flip the table situation is about alignment more than anything else. And I am going to check my notes because I don't want to forget anything. But it's about alignment. Can you turn the other cheek, walk away without being out of integrity and without being out of alignment? Or is confronting the situation what is required to remain in alignment? So a couple things, if you're going to, turn the other cheek, is this things to think about? One, is this a situation where it's really not worth your time? We're confronting the person, we're speaking up about the thing, the return on investment is just not there. The saying, the juice is not worth the squeeze. If it's not worth your time to really remedy what went wrong, whether it was disrespect or whatever, you might want to think about turning the other cheek. The other thing is, if this is a situation where there's really no impact on your peace or your physical safety, you may want to think about turning the other cheek. And then the third is if there's going to be no harm to your reputation. So when people are engaged in character assassination, I personally do not believe it's a good time to turn the other cheek. Depending on what they are doing and what they're saying, I don't think you need to directly get involved necessarily, but you may need to hire a lawyer to send them a cease and desist letter. You may need to involve other friends and family members who are aware of the situation, who can, whatever. But, if your reputation is being damaged, especially if it's going to impact you professionally, I would not recommend turning the other cheek. So talking about flipping tables, here are some times where I think you should seriously consider being the person who chooses to flip the tables. The first one is if the alternative to flipping the table in this circumstance, if the alternative is to live a lie. So if there is a situation going on where you're being wronged and remaining silent about what's happening would require living a lie or withholding a truth in a way that you know is harming people, time to flip the table. Another one is kind of like what I just said, if speaking up will help prevent future wrongs, or if speaking up will help remedy past wrongs, time to flip the table. And then finally, if speaking up is what's required to help preserve your peace and your physical safety, time to flip the table. And depending on what's happening in your life, my advice, if you choose to act on it, may cause a lot of conflict, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. One of the things that Cloud and Townsend talk about in the Boundaries book is that when you first start doing the work to enforce and implement and develop mature boundaries, one thing you can begin to experience, they call it old anger, and it's kind of like the collective weight of years of no's that were never vocalized or heard or honored. And you know, when I did my boundaries work, my old anger showed up in really surprising ways, and I started flipping tables with family members. And you know, with family, depending on the relationship, you know, they'll love you, they'll forgive you. In my case, I had a handful of relationships where I had allowed disrespect and poor treatment to be the standard. And so I changed, but the other person didn't change. But I had spent, you know, at that point over 30 years training them how to teach me, training them that it was okay to speak to me a certain way, to treat me a certain way. And so they had an expectation of what was permissible. And because I was doing my work and I was feeling all this old anger, I'm the one who pulled the rug out from under their feet quickly. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend, you know, saying more calmly what your new standard is now so that people can have a chance to readjust. But in my case, I wound up not talking to one of my immediate family members for about 2 years. And then there's another family member that I still don't talk to. And, you know, partly as a result of this old anger, but sharing to say that this idea of flipping tables is one that I personally have, you know, done in my own life. And, you know, I think it's worth it. Even if other people don't agree with you, even if you're misunderstood, the peace is worth it. And in my case, with the relationship that mattered, the person was sorry, wanted to change, and we now have a great relationship. So, yeah. So, like I said, if you have mature boundaries, you can remain calm. And the reason that you can remain calm is because you know that if people try to push, you will enforce your boundaries. So there's no reason to get upset. There's no reason to fear being taken for granted because you know it's not a non-option. You know, a lot of times when we have anxiety about a situation, it's because we haven't decided that we won't tolerate disrespect. We haven't decided that we won't tolerate being taken advantage of. There's a situation actually today where someone was wanting to hire me to do something, and I have made a decision that I am unavailable for work that is beneath what I am worth being paid. And this person was wanting me to seriously discount my rate. And, you know, I just said no. I made sure that I completely understood what the ask was, explained why that didn't work for me, and just said no. There was a time where I would have said yes to help them out because, you know, they really wanted my help because yada, yada, yada. And I would have felt super resentful because I said yes. And then I would have been upset when I saw them and felt like they took advantage of me. But the truth is, I took advantage of me. They couldn't take advantage of me without my consent. And by saying yes to the thing that was devaluing me, I was allowing them to take advantage and training them what my true worth was. And so rather than do that, I said no. I pointed them in the direction of resources that they could use to kind of figure the thing out on their own, and stood in my power and in my self-respect and honored my boundaries. And I remember thinking, like, I could just say yes to this and it would only take a couple hours. And then I was like, no, like, it would be out of integrity. Like, I've already made a promise to myself that I'm not going to be available for work that is lower than my value. This person wants me to accept something that's lower than my value. Even though no one will ever find out, I will know that I compromised with myself. And I believe that one of the most important parts of having healthy, mature boundaries, like truly mature boundaries, is integrity with yourself. Because when you are in integrity with yourself, you will know the difference between, like, okay, this is a situation where I need to walk away versus this is a situation where I need to let them know exactly who they're trying to mess with. So with that said, I have been coaching for about 4 years now, and the work that I've done has primarily been one-on-one. And in the process of working with people one-on-one for the last couple of years, I have come to believe that everyone's kind of dealing with the same things. Like, we think our problems are unique, and a big part of why is because we don't talk about the things that make us feel uncomfortable and vulnerable, insecure, but our problems are pretty similar. And I have, dealt with people in their 20s up till their 60s. This year, people have started sending me their children, which has been really interesting, and an honor, to say that they respect me enough to want me to speak into the lives of their children. But in doing that, I've just noticed so many common denominators, and I have for about a year now been thinking, I wish I could just get everyone in the same room together so they could know that they're all dealing with the same thing. And so what I have decided to do is I've created a membership. It's called the Gold Standard. And as a Gold Standard member, you're going to get a weekly email from me. It'll be on Mondays, Mindset Monday. It'll come to you in the morning before work starts, and it will have just a really high impact, potent message from me to help you get your mindset right for the week. So helping you develop those mature boundaries, helping you know when to turn the cheek, when to flip the table, and how to do it. So you'll get Mindset Monday every Monday, and then once a month, there'll be a group coaching call where I will have a message. It's going to be around one of 4 themes, either health and wellness, relationships, like with yourself, with the world, with your spiritual center, spirituality, and specifically how to develop, spiritual practices that nourish you, regardless of whether you are agnostic, Christian, in between, it doesn't matter. You can have a spiritual practice regardless of what, belief system you hold on to, because at the end of the day, we live in a world that is largely governed by invisible forces. And so it is to your benefit to understand how to use them to improve your experience in day-to-day life. So we talk about spirituality and then money. A lot of people in my world have plenty of money. They don't struggle with money. But what is a struggle is their experience of money, the emotions that money has, feeling a sense of safety with money rather than feeling a sense of dread or constantly feeling scarcity. And so I will talk about how to change the emotions and the experience that you have around money so that money can be something that serves you truly and something that is buying you freedom every day, as opposed to something that you are working for and then it has to feel hard and heavy. So if you are interested in that, in the description box below this video, there is a link to sign up. And if you are watching this in April of 2025, currently there is founding member pricing, which is $99 a month. And for context, my current hourly rate for one-on-one coaching is $2,000 a month. So with the Gold Standard, you get access to me weekly through the Mindset Monday, and then once a month in the group coaching call, you'll get access to me for a year for less than it costs to work with me for an hour. So I'm hoping that this will be a way where I can work with a lot of people, get everyone in the room, and the calls will be a little over an hour long, of me teaching, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end where, free for all. If you can't make it, you can send in a question in advance, and you'll get access to a student portal where the replays will be uploaded. So if you don't get to make the call, but you have a question, you can submit it and then hear the answer when you listen to the replay. So I'm really excited. I know it's gonna be incredible, and I'm really excited about helping people see what I have been seeing, which is we're all dealing with the same things, and we're a lot less different than we think. So that is all for now. I hope you loved this. Please tell me what one of your biggest takeaways was in the comments below. I'd love hearing feedback. And if you know someone who is struggling with setting healthy boundaries and standing up for themselves, and you feel like this message would help them with figuring that out, then please share this with them, because your referral to someone that you care about means the world to me, and it's what helps this channel grow. So that is all for now. Bye.